The first bill on the calendar for today is House File 1066. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 1066, number 1, the calendar for the day, an act relating to telecommunications, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Crecia, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And before I begin on this bill, there's a number of thank yous that have to come into play. I was lucky enough to work on this at this point, but this has been about 10 years in coming. And I've worked with people across the aisle, Representative Thiessen, Representative Hoppe, the current chair of Commerce, Representative Atkins, the former chair of Commerce, as well as Representative Johnson and Representative Sanders, and a host of other broad coalition of folks who've come to play on this. The interesting thing about this bill, when I first took this bill and I sat down in the Commerce Committee, my opening comments were, members, I know more about the great conquest of 1066 than I do about telecom reform. And that's what this bill is about. And what I didn't know was when I finished that first hearing, I realized that we did have in front of us a huge task in front of us. We had a broad coalition that was fighting for consumer advocacy plus a telecom industry where there was no parity, and we needed to bring all this together. So the bill that you have in front of you, members, is very technical. I'm going to just run through it in a highlight and not try to get into the real technical part of it. But what we have is we have two broad categories of telecommunication services. One of them is the incumbent local exchange carrier, and these are telecommunication service providers for voice services that have been in existence in a territory before 1996. And then what we have is the competitive local exchange carrier, the CLECs, that have come into play after 1996. And what's happened is, depending on where you've entered the market, you will have different sets of rules for you. And so what happens is, if you're into a market space and you're providing services, you're held to a regulatory environment that can be more onerous and burdensome than if you come in as a competitor after 1996 and you can elect for other forms. I'll give you a good example. You might have a Ma Bell telephone company, a POTS telephone, and they're held to the 1996 and before regulation. And then you have a cable company that comes in and offers voice over IP, but also offers voice services. They can now elect for the other set of rules, which may include not paying universal service fees and other funds that we use for broadband and other telecommunications. So what we needed to do is we needed to work through all the regulations, and we need to make this equal so that both the ILECs and the CLECs are the same and they can apply to the same rules, as well as make sure there is consumer advocacy for last call completion, for last provider, so that people are getting the services that they need and that there's still a regulatory environment. The last thing that I'll say on this is everything in this bill has a broad agreement from legal aid. I have letters from legal aid, who's done a wonderful job of helping this, AARP, and we have the telecommunications service industries, the Minnesota High Tech Association, and the industry groups. And all of that has come together, and we've got an agreement in front of you. We're going to see a delete all amendment that is that agreement with some technical changes. So with that, members, I hope that you'll vote green. And I hope that you know that we've moved across the English Channel with everybody on board, and now we have put peace in the valley with the 1066.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Crecia moves to amend House File number 1066, the first engrossment, and the amendment is coded DE4.
The gentleman from Morrison, Representative Crecia, to the DE4 amendment.
Ditto. Vote green.
Discussion to the DE3 amendment. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I have been in contact with AARP, and I wanted to make it clear that while they have removed their opposition, they're currently neutral, not supporting. I also have had conversations with the Attorney General's office, and they are not in support of the proposal. So while it was represented that there is peace in the valley, there is not necessarily peace in the valley, and I'm still a no.
Discussion. There is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Kreshaw moves to amend his amendment to House File Number 1066, first engrossment, as follows, and the amendment is coded A7.
To the amendment, Representative from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And this is a technical cleanup. And we're on the A70, yes. This is a couple of things that we caught that deals with the definition of telecommunication services and just moving some words around to make sure the statutes are correct. And with that, members, I urge your support on this amendment.
Discussion on the amendment to the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails. There is an amendment to the amended amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Johnson S. moves to amend the Kreshaw amendment to House File Number 1066, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A6.
To the amendment, the gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Johnson S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to withdraw that amendment.
The amendment has been withdrawn.
And then if I could speak to the bill just briefly.
You certainly may. The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Johnson S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this current telecom regulations bill, the regulations that are current stem from a time when the telephone industry was regulated as a monopoly, when the telephone companies were regulated as monopoly. But currently, these traditional telephone companies now need to compete on a level playing field because we have cable companies and we have wireless companies are all involved in the voice voice systems, voice communications. So what this bill does is provide an opportunity for a level playing field so that the traditional line telephone companies can compete more effectively, which would be good competition for the entire voice industry. The plus side as well is that it maintains the important and essential consumer protections such as basic local service, which we fought for and to make sure it stays in effect. And I was especially glad to see the language addressing the issue of rural call completion and a process for resolving disputes between telephone utilities. Now there's one issue that remains outstanding that we can deal with, I think, next section. It's bill transparency. Customer billing is one of the more frequent issues and complaints that they get at the Department of Commerce, and it seems reasonable and desirable to have a clear listening and description of these charges. And I'm confident that when we deal with this issue again next session, that we'll be able to resolve this. Again, thanks Representative Kresha and Representative Hoppe and Representative Atkins and others, the parties involved, for helping make this work. I will note that AARP, what they sent to me, I just want to make sure that you know that they are in agreement. They said AARP is in agreement on the compromise language in this particular bill. We would like to thank the industry, yourself, meaning me, and Representative Kresha for working with us to achieve this compromise. So members, this is a compromise. This is a consensus bill. This is a bill that's good for the state of Minnesota, and I appreciate your support.
To the amended amendment, the DE4 amendment as amended. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill's third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1066, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill as amended. The gentleman from Carver, Chair Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, a lot of this has been said, so I won't reiterate everything, but this bill has been a long time in coming. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention former Representatives Mike Beard and Representative Al Junkie, who with Speaker Thiessen, then Representative Thiessen and I think when we started talking about this was probably 10 years ago. And when we would talk to other people, we got a lot of eyes rolling back in their head, much like I'm seeing now. But it is important for Minnesota, and I'm glad that it's getting done. And thank you to Representative Kresha, thank you to Representative Johnson and Atkins, those that have worked on this over the years. And most of all, thank you to all the staff that have worked on it, all of the outside groups in the industry and out that have come together with this compromise. I think it's a good bill, good for the state of Minnesota. And as I said, it's been a long time in coming. Please vote aye.
To the bill as amended. The gentleman from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just finally, one group that I forgot, I do have also a letter of support from the Communication Workers of America and the American State Council, AFL-CIO. So as you can see, I just want to go back and reiterate what Representative Hoppe and others have said. We have a broad coalition of agreement on this, and I'm very thankful.
Discussion to the bill is amended. The clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Con votes aye. There being 122 ayes and 6 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.